friends, welcome back to the Film Alchemist podcast, a show where we take the movies we love, break them apart, to find out what gives them their magic. I'm your host, Josh Grivy, joined as always by my friend, co-host, and guy who never wears a life jacket.
Alex Dandino.
There we go.
I mean, that is in theme with what you just said. So
just a whole instrument ruined by a movie.
Wow.
As much as Steve Martin and Ed Helms have tried, it's over. No one wants to be associated with the banjo after Deliverance. All right, guys, we're starting a new curation today. First, a little business. Please go to our Patreon, patreon.com/filmalchemistpod. Support the show. Help us grow the show. We do a lot of awesome stuff over there for our patrons to make that worth their while. We would appreciate it if you could be so kind. Again, that's patreon.com/filmalchemistpod. Subscribe to the YouTube Film Alchemist. We're on all the socials, including now TikTok. If you want to go over there and see some stuff we're making there, you can email the show, filmalchemistpod@gmail.com. Make sure you're leaving 5-star ratings and reviews. And go check out the work over on misfitparade.net. If you want to see some films that we are working on and starting to roll out, we would appreciate all of the support. Thank you, thank you, thank you! Okay. Recovering from sickness, so bear with me. I think I'm through it. I think I'm through it now. But there's no time to waste, Dr. Jones. We are here at the new curation. We are, for March, it's Oscar season. The Oscars will be held in the middle of the month.
Yep.
So we were going to do an Oscar-themed curation, right? We were going to do one of these. Let's talk about a bunch of the movies we like that are nominated for Oscars. This year, the people who have made Oscar-nominated movies have decided to be huge fucking idiots and not make their movies available at the homes of people who have jobs and kids. So we can't just fucking drop everything and go sit in a theater for 3 hours, multiple times a week. If your movie's nominated for an Oscar, you should have that fucking movie out for people to buy in their homes more than a month before the Oscars.
At least by the middle of February.
At least by the middle of February, right? It seems fucking insane to me that 3 to 5 of the movies we were going to talk about in the curation are not available. Neither here nor there. So we're audibling. We might have some of the newer movies we like this year. A very weird year for the Oscars. Not an exceptionally strong batch of films this year. There's some really good ones and then a lot of, all right.
I think that's
but who knows which ones we'll get to.
Really good ones and then just okay ones. There's
no not the
grand
slam home run movie unless you're like Oppenheimer, Barbie people. Both fine movies.
Great.
But we'll see which of those we get to. So we decided if we can't get to a movie by the time we need an episode, we're going to open it up. Any movie ever nominated for Best Picture. So that brings us to Deliverance. I can't say enough about Deliverance. I've always loved this movie. It's one of those, show me a horror movie that's not a horror movie, or like the scariest movie that's not a horror movie. Great performances. Ultra effective. I love stories that happen in this beautiful spot of when you don't have to go that far to be outside of society, laws, ideals, and just watching how that happens. This movie's a lot about people who have been coddled and sheltered by society and laws and this and that. Watching them kind of play God, right? And stomping out casually into nature. Like, oh, everything else has worked out for us. We're fucking white guys in Atlanta. Everything's been good for us. This will surely be the same. Until it isn't, man. And you realize we are not that far. This is a Batman thing, right? We're all one bad day away. From it all just being ripped apart. And I love stories that, just kind of remind us how unsteady this fucking agreement we have with the rest of the species is.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, between the cast and the script, and it's tense, it's brutal. Other than the worst day for night shots of all time, this is a fairly flawless film to me. So, right. Alex, opening thoughts on Deliverance.
Yeah, for most of the movie, I thought we were watching the opposite of Night Country. I'm like, oh, cool. It's just daytime all the time in Atlanta. I didn't know. I mean, yeah, it's just a great movie about it's just a great movie about the like survival instincts we all have that kick into gear when survival is actually at stake. I think that's a really fascinating thing. Like, it's wonderfully cast for a movie that was like, I mean, holy shit. The stories about how this movie was made is pretty shocking. Like, even by like 70s standards, pretty crazy. Like, they purposely like rock bottomed Borman's Borman's production in terms of budget to the point where he couldn't hire huge marquee actors. Like, again, we think of Burt Reynolds as somebody completely different before this. Like, this was the movie besides Smoking the Bandit made him like a megastar at the box office. This was the movie that like made him Burt Reynolds, though.
Yeah.
Like, Smoking the Bandit made Burt Reynolds like, you know.
Now he was like a pop culture icon.
Yeah, that was like pop culture icon. This, like, people were like, holy shit, that TV guy is really good at acting. We should put him in more movies. But
I mean, yeah, you got a youngish John Voight.
Ned Beatty's first
amazing.
movie. Like, it's a really
Ronnie Cox went on to a really good kind of like always a rich prick career.
Yeah, Ronnie Cox went on to being, you know, the great Paul Verhoeven character in every Paul Verhoeven movie.
Yeah,
like,
getting fucking his arms elongated as he falls out of the tower in RoboCop. But listen to
now
this
we know
here, though. So
now we know
talking
why,
about
because he got yanked out of its socket.
Yeah, and that's what he looks like at the end. In context of this year, so I was like, how did this movie not win Best Picture? Right? The Godfather won that year. This was 1972, the 45th Oscars. The Godfather, Cabaret, and two I can honestly say I have not seen. The Immigrants with an E, and Sounder, right? But you're like, to fucking run into The Godfather is just a really unfortunate award season buzzsaw.
Well, like, there's always that, like, especially at this time in the 70s, there's always that one movie that's just this like juggernaut of a movie that everyone's like, well, whatever comes in second, I'm sure was also very good, and that would be The Godfather.
If you
and
start
Godfather
going
Part 2
through decade
movies.
by decade, the 70s have a really good case for just the decade of filmmaking. But it's a great film, right? And
it is.
It's one of those. It's so fascinating, right? Because we kind of talk about
an uninsured.
There's this. We're
film.
gonna rape this landscape. We're gonna destroy all this beauty. It's kind of these montages of industrialization, with guys just kind of talking and laughing and shooting the shit. And I actually love that opening scene too, right? Because we kind of start that way. These guys get out of their truck and immediately are just shitting all over these genetic deficients, I think as they call them. And the famous scene in this opening that I think is actually a great microcosm for this movie, because it's always existing in these ethical debates, right? So Ronnie Cox gets out. He's playing his guitar. There's a little boy who has something going on with him who's kind of matching him beat for beat. And it's become the iconic, horrifying soundtrack of the movie. That and the sound, wee! Those two sounds have now been frozen and is terrifying because of this movie, right?
Yeah.
I actually love that scene, right? Because what you see is Ned Beatty walking around just being a huge piece of shit. And I was like, man, for Ned Beatty, whatever's going on with him, short, got his own problems, hairline, whatever the fuck's wrong with his teeth, he sure loves to stomp around someone's front yard and declare them as genetically inferior. Burt Reynolds was kind of taking the piss out of him. But there's this moment, right? That moment that's become scary. It's actually this kind of beautiful moment of these two people from two different worlds who bond over this universal music, right? Mm-hmm. And you see the kids smiling, and Ronnie Cox like, I play with this kid forever, right? The dad's over there. He stops pumping gas. He just starts fucking shucking. He's like, let's go. You're like, okay, cool. The moment the song ends, right, the kid looks away and won't acknowledge him anymore. Mm-hmm. And it's this really nice kind of reminding us that even though these are all Southerners, they're all white guys, whatever, there are these really distinctive fucking lines that we draw on each other. And so watching the guys who are just these freewheeling, except for Lewis, who has other shit going on, these freewheeling, like, you know, hey, we're just here to fucking canoe and drink some beers or whatever. Watching them come in and just kind of be so fucking dismissive and rude and horrible. I think it's such a wonderful opening to this movie.
Well, again, it's like this spectrum of what modern men were in 1972. So it's like you have Burt Reynolds' character who's this, quote, mountain man who's like trying to get back to this.
Yeah, now he'd be on like Instagram talking about like alpha males.
This is like a guy who, like, in the 2024 parlance, Burt Reynolds' character is like Bear Grylls, but like Bear Grylls' sidekick.
No, I was going to say like a guy who watched Bear Grylls and he goes, that guy's a puss. I drink my own piss with my cereal. Like one of those guys, right?
He's one of those guys who's just like, oh, I live off the land. Like people who go camping. And I don't have a problem with people who go camping. Like camping's great. I've done it a few times.
Do whatever hobbies you want.
Whatever
there is
hobby
a
you
bit
want,
of Lewis that feels like he came out here specifically to shoot humans.
Oh, I mean, like, to me, it's like all a put on. Like, it's one of those guys who just, he's like, oh, I love survivalist stuff. And you're like, okay, cool. Congratulations, you're that guy. And then you have Ed, and Ed's like, to me, the character that I think we all kind of hope we are, which is just a guy who's out to enjoy nature almost.
Yeah.
And then
he's kind of the glue of the friend group.
Yeah. And then you have Ronnie Cox.
And you're like, why the fuck is anyone friends with Lewis?
Yeah.
He seems like such a huge
like such
piece
an
of
alpha
shit
douche, and he's like
starts
sitting there calling Ned Beatty chubby the whole time.
Boy.
I don't want to be with that chubby boy anymore.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
And
then you have Ned Beatty.
What's his name? Ronnie Cox says that at one point. He's like, yeah, he wants to be one with nature, but he knows he can't hack it.
Yeah.
It's like these guys clearly talk shit about Lewis all the time when he's not around.
Like Ronnie Cox is Ronnie Cox, and then you have Ned Beatty, who's like the other side of the argument of Lewis, which is, oh, Bobby is just an insurance salesman who says he said he went outside one time. That's all.
Okay.
That's,
So I do think this movie makes arguments that it's not meaning to in a way.
Often.
Because I do think the movie, if you watch it now, right? Yeah. In this point in my life, I watch him like, man, Lewis is a fucking douche.
Mm-hmm.
He's setting them on a course for things that they're not ready to go. So even if these other men don't find them, there's a good chance this isn't going to go well for some of them, right?
Yeah.
All he does is insult Ned Beatty constantly, right? He's like the soft little weak chubby boy.
Chubby boy.
Here's the
keep
problem.
Rowing.
I get it. He's insulting him. You're like, all right, so the guy who uses phrases like I'm an alpha, right? Anyone you know who says shit like that is an absolute fucking loser. Mm-hmm. No big deal. We know some of these people. Fine.
Many of them, actually.
The moment that the movie then is like, hey, you know what we should have Ned Beatty's character do? Say that he's going to go hump the shit out of his blow-up mattress without access to like a shower or laundry. And that's like, oh, they're telling us Lewis is right. Like they're trying to tell us Lewis is right. And I don't know if that's what they mean.
Well, I think that's the thing about the movie is like Ronnie Cox and John Voight's characters are these people that you could probably aspire to be a little bit. You're like, oh, they're like,
don't bring your
shit.
fucking sad guitar songs to the campfire. But other than that, he seems like a cool guy.
Yeah. I mean, Ronnie Cox's character is that guy who brings his guitar everywhere. You're like, yeah, I get it. You play guitar. Thank you.
Yes. Dude,
you were in a band when you were 15. I understand.
Thank you. Yeah.
But like,
you can't finger me. Put your guitar away.
Right. I'm like, there's no girls here. Like, you're not gonna get laid playing your guitar. We all think you're annoying.
Well,
that's not how Ned. That's not why Ned Beatty got laid.
And what? They didn't hear a cover of fucking Green Day, and they're like, "That's it."
Yeah, they didn't hear Longview, and they're like, "Well, all right, I'm coming now." So it's this really uncomfortable.
So
it's this really uncomfortable thing though, because I think to me Ned Beatty's character is so fascinating in that he's clearly like this victim at the very beginning of the movie, but also sort of, I think John Borman unintentionally gives this direction of like, he's still a piece of shit. So like when
John
terrible
Borman
things start
hates him.
happening, you're
dude,
like,
watch how he acts when he first shows up to the Banjo kid's house.
Fucking asshole.
He's such a fucking piece of shit.
Yeah.
Like, you cannot just talk about these people like they're left behind cesspool.
Like they're not hearing you either.
I don't want to body shame Ned Beatty. But I'm saying you cast Ned Beatty and then you have him throwing around all these physical dispersions everywhere. That's telling me what this character is and isn't to you.
Yeah.
And I think one of the interesting things looking at the movie nowadays is there is this intrinsic valuing of manliness.
Yeah.
Right? That you have to be a man who can take care of yourself, who can climb mountains and go fucking kill a hillbilly and, do all this shit. You got to do man shit. While constantly assaulting and undercutting the male audience, right? It's telling us, hey, this is a movie for men who pine to be men again, right? Society and women and laws and rules have neutered us. While also kind of putting our noses in it and saying, this is what that fucking rampant masculinity becomes. Right? And it's one of those, I mean, again, you take it back to the early 70s. Sadly, this is not the first rape that had ever been in a movie. It's probably one of the most explicit rapes of a man. Right?
Yes.
And at that time, so a very male-focused audience is coming to watch this movie they think is going to be this fucking bro romp through the woods battling rednecks. And they're forced to really sit.
Yeah.
And really watch this at the edge of society. These other two men say, our manliness will trump you and we have a gun.
Right.
And they're fucking tying him by the neck to a tree and slowly cutting his tits. And, they're like the chase scene of Ned Beatty, not to be too graphic. And, we always do this with like these kind of scenes in movies. But it's filmed slow and vulgar. And you can feel the purpose of that scene, it feels in the movie, is specifically to put men in that fucking boiling water, right? You've seen lots of movies that implied female rape and this and that. There is this thing at that time, right? Like, it was not a very open and okay society for homosexual men.
No.
And this is, it's not even about that. It's just this fucking degrading of another human being.
I think that's the more like brutal thing, is it's not about like anybody being gay or homosexual at all. It's about it's about power.
You see Beatty's character all of a sudden reacting more to like, I just don't want people to know about this because I want, and it's heartbreaking. So you're like, yeah, no one wants. You go through this whole spectrum of what that crime does to victimize people, right? That sitting and making men, because I think a lot of men, when these scenes come on, it's like, well, I would never do that. That's fucking horrible. I understand. This movie puts it on us, right? This toxic masculine problem of another man assaulting a man, right? It's one of those that at the time it's like, yeah, you could easily be a victim of this crime too. This is not something that only happens to women or this and that. And it's such a fucking vulgar, it makes your skin crawl rewatching the scene. But you can tell in the way they film it and the way the shots are laid out, the exact purpose is to take this audience that came in to cheer these men and fucking really make them get in the mud with the implications of where this goes when you start eschewing everything, right? And you have this like remnant of Ronnie Cox runs up and sees his friend, assaulted and this and that, but still clinging on to this idea of like, we have laws, we're a society.
Yeah.
And watching all of those men react to it, right? And imagining what's going on in those audiences. I'm pretty anti these kind of scenes in movies for the most part.
Very much so.
I think this one does have a lot of narrative purpose, at least.
It's interesting you put it that way, because like, to me, the narrative purpose is actually almost the opposite of what the normal narrative purpose is for this sort of scene in a movie. Because in this sort of scene in a movie, like, it's famous now because it's just so shocking when you watch it. But that's like, to me, the value of it in the movie is you remember this scene. It sticks with you. You get to the end of this movie, and it's almost like Ned Beatty's character doesn't, like, it's a thing that didn't happen to him. Like, this, like, the shock and terror of it happening doesn't like sit with him the way that you expect it to in this movie. And it's almost disgusting in that he just like shrugs it off. It's fascinating.
You know what I was thinking about? Because there's a scene at the end, right? Because you watch him try to snap into like, now I gotta be, not the chubby guy that Lewis was yelling at that day. I don't like getting yelled at. Now I gotta be
insurance salesman.
So he's the only one that Lewis even is baiting him. So Lewis even puts it to him and is like, hey man, you got raped. You're the one who has to wear this, even though I just shot a guy. Yeah. And he goes, what do you think? And you see him like lash out like he's gonna punch the corpse. Like, he has to react in a way that Lewis will find satisfactory. And you watch the weight of him having to fucking do this dance of like he was just the victim of a fucking horrifying, unimaginable crime.
Yeah.
But the second time he's kind of victimized, it's because he's got to fucking butch up around the guys now,
right,
and get out and find this. And they're using him as an excuse to bury bodies and this and that. And the scene at the end, right, when he's like, I don't think the cops are buying it. So not only was he victimized, now he's running point on the cover up. And then when he's scared, he's like, I don't think they're fucking buying it. And, you know, whether he's going to get in trouble or they're going to find out what happened to him out there. We don't know if he has a wife and kids at home, whatever. When fucking John Voight is like roughhousing him and slamming him up against the wall, I was like, the idea of just grabbing someone who just suffered this and like, I'm going to fucking re-victimize him with my fucking manliness. Because part of the journey of the movie is watching him becoming what Lewis thinks he is.
Yeah.
And watching that new version of him like jostle this survivor around. And again, I think a lot of movies it's done in like this really cheap, titillating way that is hard to fucking suffer it being in a movie.
Sure.
I feel like this one at least, what it really is driving home is that crime for an audience that I don't think appreciates the trauma of it properly. And it's sad that maybe we have to see it through our own like fucking point of views or whatever. But yeah, because I think this scene is so prevalent for the rest of the film. And I think watching the ripple effects of it, right? Or of just these guys realizing like, you know, Ed's character, now I got to go kill a redneck to prove that I'm tough because I was about to be sucking a dick, you know, had they not gotten shot. Like, we don't know it. What did you, like, what crimes were coming? And so you watch all these men trying to rewrite themselves. And it stops becoming this, like, battle versus Mother Nature, even though that's kind of there, right? That kind of fades to the back of this battle versus who they thought they were when they came out in these woods.
I mean, like, the concept of survival becomes less about the elements and more about just themselves. Like, can you survive and get to the other side of this event without becoming this version of yourself that maybe you don't like? Can you still be a part of society in a way that's meaningful if you succumb to these like baser urges, essentially? Like these guys, like Ronnie Cox's whole thing about laws and those kinds of things is like, it's the last gasp of, please, can we just be civilized? Let's just be the better people.
For something to hold. Right. Well, like me and Amy were watching it and we were debating. We're like, what would you do? And I was like, yeah, if I saw someone like trying to rape all my friends and I could take the shot, I was like, yeah, I'm doing that. And she's like, yeah, I agree with that too. But why would you hide the body? And it's another one of those moments where this movie is almost flawless, but it makes a couple like narrative missteps. Mm-hmm. Like at the end when the sheriff's deputy is the rapist brother. And he's just like, don't let them go. I know they're up there. It's like, so now you're telling me that Lewis was right to bury the body because this guy's cousin is in law enforcement. It's like, you know, no. Like,
yeah,
no, I don't think they're right to bury the body. I think everyone would mostly agree that he's right to take the shot. But that's what I mean. It's always in these kind of interesting. And again, I think it's different because me and Amy are doing it laying in our bed, comfy and safe. And we're like, oh, yeah, we'd fucking shoot a guy with an arrow. No problem. We do this. And it's like, that's the whole point of the movie. Yeah. These fucking philosophical things you bullshit about over a joint or at a bar. When you're in the shit and you're fucking shaking, what do you do?
Yeah, the movie does a very good job of giving all these characters room to make like critical human mistakes.
Yeah.
I agree. I thought that was a very strange thing for the movie for the story to be about, for the movie to give justification for what it was. It's like, I don't need that in a movie, especially like this. Like the ambiguity and the like moral complexity is what gets you through. Like to give any sort of justification for
there's
doing
no
what
justification
they did,
for burying a body.
Yeah, like
ever.
There's
if you find yourself burying a body,
do those things in a movie to justify. Like I don't need it. Just like it's a horrific act, no matter what. don't justify. I don't
He
want
was
to
a
justify.
terrible fucking criminal.
These people need
and
to.
Even if you should not go to jail for putting an arrow in his back because he's about to fucking commit another rape.
Yeah.
Okay. Once you start burying him, you are on a bad path. You are making a bad fucking choice. You are saying that what I just did I know is not right. And I like when your dog tries to throw up under the, kitchen table to save you and them the embarrassment, and then you put your foot in it later, you're like, this isn't better.
Yeah.
This is still wrong. This is not how we should be living in our house. So yeah, they know what they did is wrong. And Lewis, I think being the focal point of that, right? Like probably pretty fucking stoked that he got to shoot someone. Like was probably fucking pumped about it and took the shot before he thought about the rest of it.
Well, and then you go further and, and then when the movie presents the opportunity again of like, because it's a weird like callback to this, like when he's hunting in the morning and he misses the deer.
He sees the deer and he shakes.
It's a strange like thing because you're like, oh, this guy is not comfortable taking a life, let alone a human's life.
Yeah, which I think is pretty fucking normal.
Yeah. Not to say that that's not cool. You should always be uncomfortable taking life.
Well,
that's
what me
bad.
and Amy said, and I was like, yeah, if I saw someone trying to like rape you, I would fucking take the shot. And you're like, this gets back to like that gun argument I have with all my friends. I need fucking guns everywhere, blah. And I was like, yeah, I get it. When you are, someone wakes you up, they hit you in the head with a club, and you're disoriented. You maybe had 4 beers before you went to bed. You're overweight, out of shape. It's pitch black. Your wife and kids are screaming. You're going to roll your fat ass out of bed, unlock your gun safe, pull your gun, take perfect, non-shaky aim with blood running in your eye in the middle of your room and John Wick everyone. Like, yes, that's a thing that I believe will happen. Right. What I actually believe will happen most of the time is by the time you would need it, you're probably already fucked. Right. And I'm not even like an anti-everyone shouldn't have a gun or whatever. But I think this like myth that like in the middle of the night I will be ready to pop into action. And then I was like, I imagine like when I get up in the middle of the night and I just have to pee. And those little baby steps I take so I don't stub my toe and trying to not miss. I don't care
about people having guns. I care about the fact that like people present the wrong we're not doing this debate on
We're not doing that. What I'm saying is
but what I'm saying
Lewis
is like, I don't
a
care about
guy
people
who's
having guns.
making the wrong
it's
argument.
Just yeah, exactly. I don't mind people having guns. It's making the wrong argument for justifying having like a billion guns seems stupid. And it's the same thing for Lewis, which is you're justifying your actions with the wrong argument.
John Voight is not off or wrong or less of a man because it's hard for him to kill something.
Yeah.
That is a normal human place for this movie to exist.
It should be.
He's a fully fleshed out member of society. Lewis is one of these guys that gives off a real... Things were not going to go well for Lewis, right? He's one of these guys that's on a dark path. Right. He has one friend who seems to have a lot of other friends, and he's the like weird guy that they're like, well, he plans pretty good trips. We'll keep doing this stupid shit with him, right? The guy who doesn't drink and just judges you and talks in metaphors about the old days and how much pioneers mattered and shit. You're like, no one would like or want to hang out with Lewis,
right?
For very long, right? And this is that moment where you're like, fuck. Because Lewis even says, he's like, this is not a fucking game. And Lewis goes, oh, this is a game. And he goes, and now you get to play it. And I was like, that exactly is why. So the movie is reminding us, while this is a Lewis written fantasy, the movie is reminding us that Lewis is a fucking moron and not a hero of this film. That he is bringing these fucking tragedies on himself and them too. I'll ask you this. Do you think just the unmotivated redneck rapist is a weird kind of curveball in the movie? I thought it was going to be more tied, and maybe I've just missed something all these years, to them specifically insulting these other... It feels very...
I don't think it's... I mean, look, whether it's spoken or not, I mean, I think they're all sort of tied together. I'd say more prevalently, though, it's less about the like random. It's less about the randomness of the act, and more about
maybe you're right though. Maybe that the random nature of it just being there.
Well, it's an interloper thing. Like it's you don't belong. Like, and they said, I mean, they
Yeah.
even tell him, like, you don't belong out here. Like, this isn't your place. Like, and they try to talk their way out of it. And again, like, there's a way to talk their way out of it. Like, and they start to do it. The problem is that these people.
Well, Ned
do
Beatty
not want to be
starts off
spoken to.
fucking immediately being condescending. And again,
Right.
that makes it sound like I'm blaming him for what happens. I'm not.
No, that's not what it is. But like,
But I think to your point, the randomness of they still think they're in a society
yeah.
that will protect them.
Well, and I think that's the key component here is like these guys come out to the woods to relax. These people live here. That's their life. Yeah. So for you to take for granted what's going on, and then on top of that to represent this industrialization in a way that's so not their violence, but like your presence feels violent because the idea
These
is
guys
that
are coming out to get their last vacation as these people's homes and lives are about to be.
Well, like they don't know who
away.
these guys are. Like they even say like, "Oh, are you guys from the the company?" Or like, "You guys, they don't
they're
know
mad
who
and they seem to have a motivation
they're
for why they're
protecting their-
taking their pound of flesh for sure.
Yeah, of
they
course.
shouldn't.
Like, no, but like they're protecting their property, so to speak. That's how they feel. So like they're not going to ask questions. They're gonna make an example of these people.
They're taking these guys and punishing them as a microcosm to the bigger entities.
Yeah, I think
force
so.
is crushing them. But it is, and it's such a gray area because this movie feels like a movie that to me that's always been written in black and whites, right? And I watched it today. I was like, there's so much more nuance in how they roll all of this out,
Sure.
right? And like, I still don't love the other redneck comes back and kills Ronnie Cox because he's just having like
Does he
a freak
actually
out
kill
for no
Ronnie
reason.
Cox?
We don't know if he shoots him because it's
Right.
hard to imagine that like that's a tough fucking shot.
With
It
a
looks
shotgun.
like Ronnie Cox, and I don't remember hearing the audio. It looks like Ronnie Cox is just having a panic attack,
Yeah,
not
same.
wearing his vest, and the fucking rapids kill his ass.
that's
which
what
is
I thought.
likely. They never show a bullet wound. But I thought the whole, like, him climbing, that's, like, where the worst day for night of all time is. John Voight just like, my buddy's got a busted leg. Our boats are fucked up. I better just free climb this, like, side of a fucking cliff and pray that I don't die, too. And then to shoot the interloper, it's just... All right. Like, that segment, to me, is not important anymore. What's important is once they decide to bury that body... Yeah. Weirdly, it's almost as if the movie's over.
Well, I think deciding to bury the bodies is a strange... It's always struck me as odd. Like, again, like, and then maybe it's just because I'm not from the 70s, but...
You've never killed a guy, yeah.
I've never killed a guy, but I assume when you, like, make a mistake or when something like that happens, you're supposed to tell the authorities somebody died. It's a strange, like, cover-up scenario because I don't know...
What? Yeah, I think that weirdly
if it's
works.
because, like, oh, did they think, oh, no one's going to believe us or something like that?
Yeah, well, he does that whole argument of, like, it'll be their cousins filling the jury, whatever. See, I think the movie makes a little bit of an error, and it's like, let's do some fucking fighting Mother Nature shit. And you're like, no, we've already established that's not what this is about.
Right.
The Mother Nature doesn't care if we're here or not, right? Like, it's going to flood everything. We make a dam, it'll just flood. Like, the water will find a way. When they bury the body... You're still having this debate with them about did they do the right thing? Right. What are they going to do when they get to town? Will Ronnie Cox be able to survive and like not break down and tell someone? What if he says, I'm telling them no matter what? And they're like, well, now we buried him. And that's, Ronnie Cox becomes the enemy. That kind of shit is interesting. John Voight climbing the mountain is not an interesting segment of this movie.
I'll tell you what's interesting about that segment is it's actually John Voight doing it.
Yeah, they're like, oh, we got to go. And he's in the boat with the broken leg. Like that's not interesting.
Did you ever hear that story about this?
Lying to the fucking cops and shit. So
right.
I think that what is a crime and what can we tolerate and what if we got to be in charge of the law, those moments work. There's this little part there in kind of that last like getting off the river bit that I feel like is not super valuable to the movie, even if it's memorable.
Sure. Did you ever hear the insurance story from this movie?
Oh, I couldn't imagine.
So Warner Brothers, in an effort to like actually kill the film from being made, like rock bottom John Borman's budget to the point where he actually I don't think they refused to insure the film.
Hell yeah.
So they went out and shot this movie. There's no insurance. So therefore, there's no stuntmen. So these guys all performed their own stunts,
Just
including
in the
John
boats,
Voight climbing that fucking rock face. John Voight did it himself.
Climbing down that fucking rope. Yeah.
So famously, there's only one scene. There's only one sequence that Burt Reynolds asked to reshoot. It's when the canoe goes over that waterfall because they do it with a dummy first, and they thought it looked bad. So Burt Reynolds was like, I want to do it. Burt Reynolds does not remember anything other than hitting his shoulder and his head and waking up on his bedside. He asked John Boorman, he's like, how did it look? And he goes, it looked like a dummy going over the waterfall. So like if you like, there's like that hard-headed Burt Reynolds story, but all these guys, to me, what's amazing, and I think it kind of like, it's why Deliverance isn't this just weirdly kind of like B movie, like Grindhouse type thing, because whatever happened out there while they're making this movie feels important in a way, because these guys were in the elements facing a lot of this themselves. The way
they were Tropic Thundering it.
They were Tropic Thundering,
them boys in this shit. Yeah.
Like there's something that feels very visceral. So, and again, I'm not saying you need that knowledge to watch this movie, but having known that, because I generally read like about what it takes to make these kinds of movies, especially in the 70s, because dude, it was the Wild West. Like people were just making shit up.
Well, I think that's the thing.
It's
it was just like these pieces that had less things interfering with them getting to the real points of the movie.
Yeah.
Now movies are very, very focus grouped, and they're thought of a lot as a product before they're even coming out. And that's always been a part of the business.
Right.
But now with the numbers we play at, it's so big. Something like this where it's like, this has that kind of like Lord of the Flies thematic thing, which is just, let's take these guys out with some really good actors and let's have them fucking argue. Yeah. What would you do? What would you do?
There is a question I thought about, because this is why by the end of the movie, I really did not like Bobby. I was like, what a piece of shit character to go through something so horrific and kind of wind up the same person on the other side almost, which is when John Voight gets out of the hospital and he goes to that Colonial Lodge, he walks in, Ned Beatty is just like enjoying having a meal and talking to these folks and all this kind of stuff. John Voight has this like breakdown at the table really quickly. Mm-hmm. I wanted to ask you, like, Ned Beatty has like no residual, like, did that?
I think it's the exact opposite.
Really?
I think for the rest of Ned Beatty's life, because of the trauma he suffered, I don't think he really thinks that corn is special. I think he's latching on to things that make him feel unbothered, untouched.
I like that.
That he can just like, everything's great for him. But I imagine in his head and in every lonely moment, Ned Beatty is broken.
Well, I'll say this: the one,
so I think it's like hyper.
Yeah,
he becomes like a hyper like dad next door.
Because it did really bother me until the very end when he says, "I probably won't see you for a while."
Oh, they'll never see each other again. No,
they'll never see each other again.
Every time he sees John Voight,
would ever want to see those people again?
He will not be able to suppress what happened to them.
Right.
So yeah, I think Ned Beatty is actually carrying an enormous fucking weight, and I think Ned Beatty's such a charming actor. Mm-hmm. Like he's such a kind of empathy machine actor. Because that scene does feel very odd that he's just like showered and like, yeah. Besides the fact that he just made it and is alive, I think he's hiding a lot there, right? And I think John Voight is trying to fucking hide it and he fucking can't. Like, and he only breaks down for like a couple seconds and then sniffs it up when the peas get handed to him.
Right.
Right? And it's, then the rest of the movie, he's this like, we don't remember. We didn't do this. And he's like being a tough guy again. So in a weird way, he's the one who didn't change enough for me. Like he almost like saw Lewis like holding out in the hospital, and then Lewis like winks and he's like, I don't remember nothing. And he's like, yeah, Lewis is the man. It's like, no, Lewis fucking sucks. Yeah. This was Lewis who put you guys in this fucking slaughterhouse to begin with.
Right.
And it feels like he took some of the wrong lessons, but then the movie at the end reminds us, well, he's going to be horrifically haunted for the rest of his days. I don't know if I believe the movie's telling us that anything will ever come from this.
I mean, the cop literally says, "I never want to see you guys again." You're like, well, maybe that's the cop's way of saying, "I understand what you did." Which, by the way, is the guy who wrote the book.
Die a peaceful death. Just fucking let us go.
Yeah, let us go. Like, leave us alone.
Do you think that the movie's hinting at that they'll pay for their crimes someday, or that they're just going to pay by being haunted?
I think they just have to be haunted for the rest, because that's like the point of the dream that Jon Voight's having that closes the movie out.
The kind of Carrie shot before the Carrie shot.
It's a thing that's just going to haunt you forever, because you did not make the right choice when it comes to being a human being. You made this survivalist choice when, like, you don't need to be a survivalist.
Yeah, and that's
not
the
a
thing.
survivalist.
You tried to play Lewis, but you are a man. You're a normal
You are a
guy.
man. You're a person. You're not this caricature of a man.
And again, I think a lot of people watching this would say, yeah, shoot the fucking guy who's about to rape your friend.
Yeah.
It says choices after, right? You can't, and they're immediately undercutting what seems like a noble, like, yeah, I think everyone would do that.
Right.
With now they're just doing crimes. Now they're fucking doing crimes. And these people to them are not people. I would argue that most rapists aren't actually people anyways that I would value as part of
I wouldn't
society.
argue it. I'd just flat out say it.
Yeah, so that's what... yeah, you know what I mean? Like, if I saw a guy and it was like, oh, yeah, that guy's going after, like, my friends or family or wife or whatever, and you're like, yeah, he just raped someone else, he's going for another. I wouldn't feel bad at all taking the shot. But again, that's these kind of ethical problems that we get to fucking argue from our safe, cozy podcasting spots. I think the movie shows that it's much more complex than that.
It's just
right?
a really
that Cain and
great...
Abel doesn't happen, and then Cain's like, oh, murder fucking rules, dude. Why didn't I do this years ago? Like, there is a heavy trauma.
It's just this really...
to doing this.
Yeah, it's just this really... It's interesting because I think for 72 it's not, but I think so many years later, it is really... Almost 40 years later, it is this... 50 years later. It's about the nuance and sort of the gray area of the world. Probably in the 70s, it's a very different story, but we just live in such a gray area now.
Well, I think it actually kind of benefits greatly from that very masculine butch POV that it seems to present.
I very much agree.
Because it seems like now you watch the movie, you're like, clearly they're trying to tell us that is not the way we should be living. Is this ultra fucking survivalist butch, fuck everything in our path, right? In the time, I'm guessing that was a decision to try to keep the audience who would come to the movie happy.
Yeah.
By showing them, like, even if bad stuff happens to you, you can fuck climb a mountain and shoot people in the neck and fucking do cool rope shit.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, but
you
it's
watch
okay
it now and you're like, they are really
survive.
Yeah, they're absolutely reinforcing a caricature.
I agree.
I don't know. It's just such
a fascinating watch.
It's a great, interesting movie, and even with like some real head-scratching decisions. I think thematically it's just so fucking potent. Yeah. And even when it's doing shit like I got to go kill the other redneck segment, which to me it's always been fun, but it's about as wasteful a segment of like a really good movie as I've ever seen. And again, it's one of those that seems to always be reinforcing the wrong lesson, which now I think years later you're like, I see what you're doing there. Like, that's on purpose. That's not the movie doesn't know what it's doing.
Yeah.
But again, I just think it's interesting and fascinating and devastating and beautiful. And, I love Ned Beatty's performance. I think it's just gut-wrenching, man. And, it's a scene that took this most horrific crime. And like I said, if you're going to have that in your movie, it needs to fucking matter a lot and be done with some deference. And I think this one is.
Yeah.
I fucking love this movie, which is, I think, another testament because it's not a real carefree romp.
No, but I think like the critical thing about that is to use that sort of thing as a plot point is the like overuse. I think what's fascinating is like about Deliverance particularly is to use that not as just a plot point, but as this catalyst for the rest of the movie, for the rest of the story to just. It's just like that it's like that spider web crack you get on your windshield. It's just like eventually it will blow apart.
Well, it does an
takes
emotional
just-
From Dusk Till Dawn where it says you think you're watching these guys battling a river.
Right.
No. We are battling the inner man, right?
It's
and
not-
that is
yeah.
now the front and center of the movie. So it is just this big fucking hard, violent turn.
Yeah.
I really enjoy this movie. I think it's so well crafted.
It's very good.
I think in most years, like this movie's better than a ton of movies that have won Best Picture. It just fucking ran up against The Godfather.
Yeah.
And that's
you
just
really
the fucking
and like
tough
there's
beat.
few movies that I think are sort of untouchable in terms of like how great they are. The Godfather is probably the only movie that I'm like, I will never dispute how great The Godfather is. Like it is a really
Godfather 1 and 2, I think were like two of these years right here.
nearly for being 3 hours each. Nearly perfect.
Just some of the
movies.
best filmmaking.
Yeah.
And they're not movies I watch often, but I do remember I watched a guy where I was like, this bullshit. Everyone loves it so much. It'll suck. They're fucking good movies, dude. They're really fucking good movies. And I have a real soft spot because I was such a Sopranos fan. That kind of for me was first, and then I went back and did more mafia shit.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, I think Deliverance, as brutal as it is, I think it has, to me, I love that it feeds the mind. That what happens, where is the edge of society? And if I was in charge, what would I really do?
Yeah.
And also that, what does it mean to be a man in society and then outside of it? And do these like hyper manly traits really protect us or not?
Again, I think this is one of
There's
those.
a lot of interesting headspace in this movie.
The 70s was just an amazing time to make these kinds of movies because no one wanted to pay for them, so you just made them in a way that was, like you said, feed the mind. I think that's
the
a really
artistic
great way to put it.
endeavors could matter as much stake-wise as the financial ones a lot of times. That's it for Deliverance. I hope you enjoyed it. It's a tough movie sometimes, but what a fucking great picture, man. Could have absolutely won Best Picture. We're going to continue. So again, we're hoping we have our list of Oscar movies this year that we liked well enough to talk about. If those are available, we're going to try to slot them in, man. There's a lot of good movies on that list we want to talk about. If not, we're going to keep going on other movies that were nominated for Best Picture. Our first alternate up, All the President's Men. So
Possibly,
that could be coming up soon.
In my
Or
top
some
5
awesome
movies of all time.
Yeah, that's a really fucking good one. That'll be a fun one. Another 70s one. So good time. Wait, that was 70s, right? Not 80s?
76.
Yep, 76. All right. Well, that's it, guys. We hope you're enjoying it. Make sure you are subscribed to the show. Make sure you go to our Patreon, Film Alchemist, or patreon.com/Film
We have
Alchemist
cool
Pod.
shit, man. Come on.
We got a lot of good stuff over there for you. Make sure you're on the YouTube Film Alchemist. Make sure you go to misfitparade.net to see all of our short horror films. Make sure you're leaving 5-star ratings and reviews. Find us on the socials, especially TikTok now. We would appreciate having you over there. More than anything, guys, thank you for making the time. I'm glad to be back post-sickness, hoping for health and power as we plow through these Oscar movies.
You sound great.
Yeah? Thanks, man. I appreciate that.
That's what I'm here for.
That's when you turn around. Like Ned Beatty does that at one time. He's like, to Lewis. He goes, I fucking hate him. Fucking hate him under his breath. I was like, that is the most relatable thing ever in a movie.
That's the thing that's really persevered to 2024. That behavior.
Yeah, just kind of like love hating your friends hard.